At first, my younger brother copied my interests, my career, and even my habits, until the day he took something I had not even chosen yet, and I began to question which life was really mine. The first time I realized my brother wanted to be me, he was 6 years old and hiding behind my bedroom door, wearing my shoes. They were too big for him. Way too big. Old brown sneakers I had saved up for mowing lawns all summer. He had stuffed the toes with paper towels so they would not slide off his feet. I remember walking in and finding him standing in front of my mirror, chin lifted, shoulders squared, like he was trying to copy the way I stood. He froze when he saw me. His face went red, like he had been caught stealing. I did not yell. I just leaned against the door frame and asked him what he was doing. He said he wanted to see how it felt. That was Dylan, my little brother, 3 years younger, always watching, always hovering at the edge of whatever I was doing, like he was waiting for permission to step into my shadow. Growing up, we were not the kind of brothers who fought constantly. We were not best friends either. It was more complicated than that. Our dad worked long shifts at a factory outside town. Our mom was stretched thin with 2 boys and a small house that always seemed one broken appliance away from chaos. I figured things out early. Fixed stuff. Helped with homework. Learned how to cook basic meals before I hit middle school. Dylan followed me everywhere. If I built a ramp for my bike in the driveway, he built a smaller one next to it. If I decided I liked a certain band, he would ask to borrow the CD and play it on repeat in his room. He copied the way I parted my hair in 5th grade. He tried to laugh like me in 7th. At the time, it felt normal. I remember one night when a thunderstorm knocked the power out. He was 8. I was 11. He came into my room with his pillow and did not even pretend it was about the lightning. He just said he felt better sleeping near me. I did not say anything. I just moved over. He used to ask me how to tie his shoes, even after he already knew. He would bring me his math homework before showing our parents. He needed my nod, like my approval carried more weight than theirs. Looking back, I can see it clearly. I was not just his brother. I was his reference point. There is this memory that sticks with me. We were at the county fair. I won a cheap stuffed bear at one of those ring toss booths. Nothing special. But Dylan looked at that bear like it was a trophy from a championship game. He kept touching it, asking how I did it, asking if I practiced. I gave it to him. He hugged it like I had handed him the world. Back then, it felt good. It felt like being admired. Like being important to someone in a way that mattered. When I got into high school, things shifted a little. I started pulling away, like older brothers do. I wanted my own space. My own identity. Football practice. A part-time job at the grocery store. A small circle of friends I did not want him orbiting. But even then, he was watching. If I stayed up late studying, he stayed up too, pretending to read. If I started running in the mornings to get in shape for the season, he asked to come along. He could barely keep up, but he tried. I told myself it was just normal younger sibling stuff. He looked up to me. That is what people always say, right? It is flattering. It was not until years later, when I saw him standing in my college dorm room doorway wearing the same brand of jacket I had just bought, that something in my chest tightened in a way I could not explain. But I am getting ahead of myself. Back then, it was simple. He wanted to be like me, and I had no idea what that would turn into. By the time I left for college, Dylan was finishing his sophomore year of high school. The day I packed my car, he stood in the driveway pretending to help, but mostly just watching. I remember catching him staring at the campus hoodie I had just bought. Navy blue. The university name printed in big white letters across the chest. It felt like proof that I had made it out of our small town. He did not say much that day. He just kept nodding, like he was committing every detail to memory. College was my first real taste of independence. I chose business analytics. Not because anyone in my family pushed me, just because I liked the mix of logic and creativity. Numbers that told stories. Patterns that meant something. Dylan called me almost every week that first semester. At first it was normal stuff. Asking how classes were. What dorm life was like. What kind of professors I had. But I started noticing the way he asked questions. Not casual curiosity. More like research. He wanted to know which classes were hardest. Which clubs were worth joining. What internships looked good on a resume. I remember joking once that he should worry about passing algebra before planning his corporate takeover. He laughed, but he wrote it down. The next year, when it was time for him to start thinking about colleges, he told everyone he wanted to apply to the same university as me. Our parents were proud. Said it was sweet that he wanted to follow in my footsteps. I shrugged it off. It felt harmless. But then he also picked business analytics. That caught me off guard. Dylan had always leaned more creative. Drawing, photography, even talking about studying film at one point. Business analytics was not something he had ever mentioned before I chose it. When I asked him about it, he said he liked how I described it. Said it sounded smart. Stable. I told myself maybe I had influenced him. That happens. Still, something in my gut twisted. It got stranger during my junior year. I had landed an internship with a mid-sized consulting firm in the city. It was competitive. I worked hard for it. Late nights. Networking events where I felt like a kid pretending to be an adult. When I came home for Thanksgiving, Dylan asked to see my offer letter. Not in a celebratory way. In a focused way. He studied it. The company name. The role. The salary. A week later, he told me he had applied for a summer internship at the same firm. As a freshman, I remember staring at him across the kitchen table. Our mom was stirring something on the stove. The house smelled like cinnamon and turkey. It should have felt warm. Instead, it felt tight. "You are a freshman," I said. He shrugged. Said he wanted to get ahead. He did not get the internship that year. But he did not seem discouraged. He just asked me what I thought he should improve. That was the first moment I felt something shift. Not irritation exactly. Not yet. It was more like I had turned around and realized someone had been standing directly behind me the entire time. When I graduated and moved to Chicago for a full-time job, Dylan surprised me again. He chose the same city. There are a lot of cities in this country. Plenty of options. But he said Chicago had opportunity. Said he liked the energy. I believed him. At least I tried to. When he found an apartment, it was 10 blocks from mine. He said it was coincidence. Maybe it was. But when he showed up to dinner one night wearing the exact same style of brown leather boots I had bought 2 months earlier, down to the brand, the laces, the scuffed toe, I felt that tightness again. I laughed it off. "Nice boots," I said. He smiled like I had given him a gold star. That was the thing. Every time he mirrored something about me, he watched my reaction carefully. Not for approval exactly. More like confirmation. Like he was checking to see if he had gotten it right. That is when the flattery started to fade. And something else started creeping in. Because admiration is one thing. But when someone starts building their life using yours as a blueprint, line by line, it stops feeling accidental. And I was beginning to wonder if Dylan was not just following me. I was starting to wonder if he was studying me. It stopped feeling like coincidence the night he signed with my company's biggest competitor. I had been working at my firm for 3 years by then. Long hours. Slow promotions. The kind of grind you tell yourself is temporary. Dylan had just graduated. Same major. Same city. Similar resume. Almost line for line. When he told me he had accepted an offer across town, he watched my face the way he used to when we were kids, and he showed me a drawing. He said it was a great opportunity. Competitive salary. Growth potential. His words sounded familiar. Too familiar. They were phrases I had used months earlier when describing my own job. I congratulated him. I meant it. Mostly. But then little things started stacking up. He joined a gym 2 blocks from mine. Not because it was cheap. Not because it was close to his apartment. But because he said he liked the layout. The same reason I had given when I signed up. He started parting his hair the way I did. Bought the same dark gray pea coat I wore every winter. Even picked up running again after years of not caring about it. It was not exact copying. It was adjusted. Polished. Slightly improved. That was the part that unsettled me. If I mentioned reading a certain book, he would read it and talk about it like it had reshaped his worldview. If I tried a new coffee shop, he would become a regular before I even memorized the barista's name. Friends started noticing. One night, a coworker met Dylan at a networking event and later asked if we coordinated outfits on purpose. He laughed when he said it. I did not. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Siblings share tastes. Brothers influence each other. It is normal. But it began to feel less like influence and more like duplication. Then came the promotion. I had been chasing a senior analyst role for months. When I finally got it, I felt relief more than excitement. I called my parents. They were proud. Dylan texted me congratulations almost immediately. 2 weeks later, he announced he had been fast-tracked into a similar position. He framed it as coincidence. Timing. Hard work. And maybe it was. But when I saw his updated LinkedIn profile and realized his description of his role mirrored mine almost word for word, something inside me shifted in a way I could not ignore anymore. For the first time, I did not feel flattered. I felt watched. And I started wondering what part of my life was still mine alone. The moment it crossed from uncomfortable to undeniable had nothing to do with work. It was a woman. Her name was Claire. I met her at a friend's birthday party. She had this calm energy about her, the kind that makes a noisy room fade into the background. We talked for almost an hour that first night. Music, travel, dumb childhood stories. It felt easy. Dylan was there too. He had arrived later. I introduced them casually, not thinking much of it. They shook hands. Smiled. Normal. Claire and I started seeing each other after that. Nothing serious at first. Coffee dates. Walks by the lake. Late-night conversations about where we thought our lives were heading. For once, something felt like it belonged only to me. I did not rush to tell Dylan details. Not out of secrecy, just instinct. But somehow he always knew. If I mentioned Claire liked Thai food, he would suggest we all try a new Thai place together. If I said she enjoyed art museums, he would text me about an exhibit opening that weekend. Then one Friday night, Claire asked if we could invite Dylan out with us. She said she enjoyed talking to him. Said he was thoughtful. I forced a smile and agreed. At dinner, I watched him carefully. The way he listened. The way he tilted his head slightly when she spoke. The way he repeated her phrases back to her, just slightly reworded. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. Weeks passed. Claire and I grew closer. She started spending nights at my apartment. She left a toothbrush by the sink. Then one afternoon, she canceled plans with me. Said she was overwhelmed. Needed space. 2 days later, I saw a photo on social media. A group picture at a rooftop bar. Dylan standing beside her. Not touching. Not close. Just near enough to make my stomach drop. When I asked him about it, he said it was random. She had been there with friends. He ran into her. They talked. He said it like it meant nothing. But something in his tone felt rehearsed. Claire ended things with me a week later. Said I felt distant lately. Hard to read. She said Dylan seemed more open. More open. That phrase echoed in my head. It was not just my job. Not just my clothes. Not just my routines. He was learning how to be me. And then adjusting the parts he thought needed improvement. And for the first time, I wondered if I was not losing by accident. I wondered if I was being quietly replaced. After Claire ended things, I told myself I was overthinking everything. People drift apart. Relationships end. It does not mean there is a conspiracy behind it. But then Dylan started dating her. Not immediately. Not in a way that made it obvious. There was a gap. Just long enough for it to look accidental. When he finally mentioned it, he framed it carefully. Said they had reconnected at a mutual friends gathering. Said he had hesitated because of me. Said he hoped I would not take it the wrong way. I remember nodding like I understood. Inside, something was splitting down the middle. He told me he did not plan it. That feelings just developed. That it was complicated. The thing is, I did not even feel jealous the way I expected to. It was something stranger. Colder. I felt edited. Claire had once told me she wished I talked more about my emotions. That I kept things guarded. Now she was with Dylan, who suddenly spoke openly about growth, vulnerability, therapy. Words he had never used growing up. He had started seeing a therapist around the same time she ended things with me. He began posting long reflections online. Thoughtful captions about ambition and balance. About not chasing approval. I read one of them late at night. It sounded like something I might have written if I were braver. That is what unsettled me the most. He was not just copying the surface anymore. He was refining the blueprint. At work, it got stranger. Our industries overlapped enough that we started attending the same conferences. At one event, a recruiter approached me and said, "Oh, you are Dylan's brother, right? He mentioned you." Mentioned me. I forced a smile and asked what he had said. Just that you inspired him to get into the field. Inspired. That word hit differently now. Because inspiration implies distance. Admiration from afar. But this did not feel distant. It felt close. Too close. Over the next year, his career accelerated faster than mine. He moved into a nicer apartment. Bought a car I had been eyeing, but never pulled the trigger on. Started investing in the same stocks I talked about, only earlier. Our parents beamed whenever they talked about us. Said how proud they were that both their sons had made it. But sometimes, I would catch them comparing us without realizing it. Dylan seems more confident lately. Dylan really knows how to network. Dylan has such a clear vision for his future. I would nod, smile, pretend none of it touched me. Part of me was proud. He had grown up watching me figure things out without a guide. Maybe I had given him something solid to stand on. But another part of me felt like I was slowly dissolving. Like the edges that defined me were being traced over and sharpened by someone else. And then came the moment that made it impossible to ignore. Because he did not just mirror my choices anymore. He made one before I could. The decision that broke something in me was one I had not even shared yet. I had been quietly interviewing for a leadership role at a startup in Denver. Different city, different pace. A chance to finally step out of the pattern I felt stuck in. I had not told Dylan. Not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted something that was untouched, unstudied. The offer came on a Tuesday morning. Equity, title bump, real influence. It felt like oxygen after years of recycled air. I sat on it for a week, weighing everything. Chicago had become familiar, comfortable, predictable, but part of me wondered if staying meant continuing this strange parallel life with my brother. I finally decided to take it. Before I announced anything publicly, I called our parents. They were surprised but supportive. Said Denver sounded exciting. That night, I planned to tell Dylan over dinner. He beat me to it. We were sitting across from each other at our usual spot. Same booth. Same low lighting. He looked unusually energized. I have news, he said. Something in my stomach tightened. He told me his company had offered him a strategic expansion role. It involved relocating to Denver. Leadership track. Equity potential. Denver. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He kept talking. About growth. About new markets. About how he had been craving a bigger move. I asked him when this happened. He said the discussions had been ongoing for weeks. Weeks. The same weeks I had been interviewing. I had told no one. No LinkedIn updates. No hints. No casual mentions. There was no way he could have known. And yet here he was, describing the exact shift I had been planning in silence. I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger. Not jealousy. Fear. Because up until that moment, I could rationalize everything. Same major. Same city. Similar industry. Even Claire. But this was a decision born in private. I forced a steady voice and told him that was interesting. That I had been considering Denver too. His eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then he smiled. Guess we think alike, he said. That smile lingered longer than it should have. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like the older brother anymore. I felt like I was being measured, and I did not know who was leading anymore. But the real shift had not happened yet. That came the night I visited his apartment before either of us officially moved. I went over to Dylan's place on a Sunday afternoon. He had asked me to help him move a few boxes before his Denver transfer became official. I told myself I was being dramatic about everything, that I needed proof before I let my mind spiral any further. The moment he opened the door, something felt wrong. Not obvious, not dramatic, just familiar. His living room had always been slightly different from mine. Brighter couch, more color, different layout. Now it looked like someone had slowly adjusted it to match my taste. Neutral tones, minimal decor, a framed black and white cityscape hanging above the couch. The exact same style I had bought the year before. Even the throw blanket was similar. Dark gray knit, folded neatly over the armrest. I tried to shake it off. Trends overlap. People influence each other. Then I walked into his bedroom. On his nightstand sat a book I had started reading 2 weeks ago. A niche title, not a bestseller. Something I had mentioned casually over coffee once. He saw me looking at it and said he had heard good things. He had not. He had heard me. But the moment that finally made my skin go cold was in his closet. The door was slightly open. Inside hung a navy blazer. Not just similar. Identical. Same brand. Same stitching on the lapel. Same subtle inside lining. The exact blazer I had bought for upcoming leadership interviews. I stepped closer and checked the tag without thinking. Same size. Dylan was taller than me by almost an inch. Broader in the shoulders. It should not have fit him perfectly. He walked in behind me. For a split second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, casually, that he liked how mine looked and figured it was a good investment piece. Investment piece. That was my phrase. I felt something settle in my chest that I could not ignore anymore. This was not admiration. This was construction. He was not following me randomly through life. He was tracking me, studying what worked, adopting it, and then polishing it. I turned and asked him something I had never asked before. Why Denver? He hesitated. It was small, almost invisible. Then he said he needed a change. That Chicago felt stagnant. Those were my exact words from a conversation weeks earlier. Word for word. In that moment, clarity hit me harder than anger ever could. He had not been chasing my life. He had been chasing my trajectory. He did not want to be me. He wanted to become the improved version of me before I fully stepped into it. And for the first time, I realized something I had never considered. Maybe I had never really noticed how closely he was watching. Because somewhere, deep down, I had always needed someone to. I did not confront him that day. That is the part that still bothers me. I saw it clearly. The patterns, the borrowed language, the replicated choices, the almost identical life forming in parallel. And I still said nothing. Instead, I helped him tape up boxes. We carried books down to his car in silence. We talked about logistics, lease dates, moving companies, surface-level things that felt safe. But the air between us had changed. That night, I went back to my apartment and sat in the dark for a long time. I replayed everything. The shoes when we were kids, the major, the internships, the city, Claire, Denver, the blazer. It formed a line, not random points. A straight line stretching back years. I kept asking myself the same question. Was he trying to replace me? Or was he trying to stay close to me in the only way he knew how? Because there is a difference. One comes from rivalry. The other comes from fear. The next week, I made a decision. I turned down the Denver offer. I told the startup I appreciated it, but needed to stay in Chicago for personal reasons. It shocked even me. On paper, it looked irrational. Career-wise, it was a risk. Emotionally, it felt necessary. I needed to see what would happen if I stepped sideways instead of forward. 2 days later, Dylan called me. His voice sounded off. He said his Denver role had fallen through. Budget changes, restructuring, timing issues. He tried to sound casual, but I heard something under it. Disappointment, confusion, almost destabilization. That is when it hit me. If he were simply building his own life, my choices would not shift his foundation. But they did. And that meant something I had not fully admitted to myself yet. His path was not just influenced by mine. It was anchored to it. For the first time in our lives, I changed direction without warning. And he had no script for that. A few weeks later, he showed up at my place unannounced. No blazer, no polished confidence, just Dylan. And when he finally spoke, his voice did not sound rehearsed. It sounded tired. That was when the truth started to surface. But it was not the truth I expected. When Dylan showed up at my apartment that night, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just less constructed. He stood in my doorway for a second like he used to when we were kids, waiting for permission to enter. I stepped aside. We sat at my kitchen table. No small talk. No rehearsed updates about work. He stared at his hands for a long time before speaking. He said he had always felt behind. That was the phrase he used. Behind. He said growing up, everything I did felt solid. Certain. Like I moved through life with direction. He said teachers compared him to me constantly. Coaches too. Even relatives would say things like, "You are lucky you have your brother to show you how it is done." He told me he never felt like he had his own blueprint. So he borrowed mine. Not to compete. Not to replace me. To feel safe. He said when I chose a major, it made the world feel less overwhelming. When I moved cities, it gave him a map. When I dated someone confident and thoughtful, it showed him what kind of relationship was possible. He admitted something that hit harder than anything else. He said he always felt like I was one step ahead of him emotionally too. That when Claire ended things with me, he did not see it as taking something from me. He saw it as stepping into a space I had already opened. He thought if he followed closely enough, he would not get lost. That was when I understood something painful. He was not trying to become a better version of me. He was afraid of becoming a lesser version of himself. And copying me felt safer than risking failure on his own. He said when I turned down Denver, it shook him. Because for the first time, he realized he had built momentum based on my direction. And when I pivoted, he felt exposed. Directionless. I sat there, listening, and something inside me softened. All those years, I thought I was being studied. Maybe I was. But I had never considered that being watched that closely is not power. It is dependence. And dependence is fragile. For the first time, I did not feel replaced. I felt seen, in a way that was heavier than I expected. Because if someone builds themselves around you, it means you mattered more than you knew. But it also means you never got to be just a brother. You were the compass. And compasses do not get lost. They get used. After that night, something shifted between us. Not dramatically. There was no hug. No movie-style reconciliation. Just quiet understanding settling into the space where tension used to sit. For the first time in years, I stopped analyzing him. And for the first time in his life, he stopped asking subtle questions about my next move. We still met for coffee. still talked about work. But the edge was gone. I made a conscious choice after that conversation. I stopped announcing my plans early. Not to test him, not to trap him, but to give both of us room. When I eventually did leave Chicago, it was not for Denver. It was for a smaller role at a different company in a different direction entirely. Something less flashy, more personal. I told him after the paperwork was signed. He did not flinch. He did not suddenly start researching that city. He just nodded and asked if I was excited. And I realized something simple. For years, I thought my identity was being copied. But identity is not that fragile. You cannot steal it by wearing the same jacket or taking the same job. You cannot duplicate it just by dating the same person or moving to the same city. What unsettled me was not the imitation. It was the idea that maybe I was not as original as I thought. That maybe I was just another guy figuring it out, and my brother happened to follow closely enough to see the seams. The truth is, Dylan never replaced me. He just used me as scaffolding while he built himself. And scaffolding is temporary. It holds things up while they take shape. It is not the structure. Years later, when he finally chose a path that had nothing to do with mine, a pivot into product design, something creative, something that fit him in a way analytics never fully did, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because he was different, but because he was finally separate. We still share habits, still overlap in taste. That does not disappear. But now, when he buys a jacket, I do not wonder who chose it first. And when I make a move, I do not look over my shoulder to see if he is tracing it. I learned something I did not expect. Being watched your whole life can feel like pressure, but it can also be proof that you mattered. And being mirrored does not erase you. It just means someone was trying to learn how to stand. In the end, I was never being replaced. I was being used as a starting point. And once I understood that, I finally felt like myself again.